We're in. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our latest LinkedIn Live. We're here today to launch our European 2021 salary guide. And of course, it is live. So if you do have any questions, please ask along the way. We'll try and answer as many of them as we can. If we don't get around to your questions, please do send them through and we'll try and get back to you at a later date. You can download the guide from the link below. Today's the first day. If you've tuned in for the UK guide, you're late. That was yesterday. So you can download that from our Harnham website. And of course, if you're interested, the US salary guide will be released tomorrow if you want to have a watch of that as well. So maybe we should just start off with some introductions. I'm Ewan. I've been working at Harnham for nearly 6.5 years now. Started off in the UK business focusing on credit risk, and over the last 2 years have led out our Nordics and Netherlands presence, with teams pretty much mirroring everything that we do in the UK. Cindy?
Hi, everyone. My name is Cindy. I sit within our digital analytics team here at Harnham, France. It's been almost 4 years now. Time flies, and nice to meet you all.
Hi everyone, my name is Peter. I'm the newbie in the group, started in 2018. I'm in Berlin, Germany, so I do run the Germany office, and we cover our specialisms here for Germany, Austria, Switzerland from Berlin.
Nice. Shall we briefly speak about what is our salary guide? So just to briefly explain it, it's an independent survey with more than 4,606 participants globally, where we present the latest trends, and from each country we cover here at Harnham. We have been doing it for 10 years now, and since then it has become the must-have. Every year, either you're a candidate looking for a new opportunity, or a hiring manager, or HR seeking to hire data analytics talents. As Yuan just said, if you have any questions, please interact with us in the comment section, and you can obviously download our salary guide from the link.
Right, thank you, Cindy. So to kick off today, there is one thing that obviously happened, started in 2019, which we're all aware of, which is COVID. Last year when we launched the guide, it was pretty much at the beginning of lockdown for most European countries. And we kind of delayed the whole thing because we wanted to catch some data. We collected it up until that point, and then we also included some data which we gathered after it was enforced, so we can sort of see a bit of change between before and after. Obviously, this year gives us a bit of more of a longer-term insight, because it's been a few months now, and people have really companies, people, candidates have started to adapt. Some things we've seen, I'm happy to open it up to you guys, but some things we've seen is that over 80% of all participants actually felt that they were prepped for remote working in terms of equipment, organization, team collaboration. So that's quite a high number we saw, but we also saw that only 68% felt that this was well communicated to them. So I guess different companies and different personalities react differently to the changes. We also saw that hours were impacted. So almost everyone, more than 75% of people said they had an impact on their hours, and also a pay cut, but that was a much lower number at around 16%. So as usual with the guide and with this data, guys, we're looking at midpoints. We're looking at what is the average, and the sort of all the data telling us. There were people that went up, there were people that went down, and we're pretty much here to discuss that. Looking forward, maybe as a final point, the work from home. That's something that we see in our company, that people in the audience will see, and please ask questions and comment on that, how that is for you. But 30% of people actually agreed a work from home setup. Usually it's split, with some days in the office, some days at home. And that is also something that's important for most people. They said that this definitely plays into their decision of looking at a new opportunity or their current opportunity when it comes to how satisfied they are. So those are some things we saw. And yeah, just looking, what are your thoughts, guys? Do you see the same? Is there something maybe specific in the Nordics or Netherlands or France that stands out in your eyes in the last few months?
I mean, I think particularly from the Nordic side, they seem to have handled it really well. I know, particularly in Sweden, obviously the lockdowns were a lot less severe, and people had a lot more that they could do. So obviously it's a little bit different in that respect. But I think, particularly in the Nordics, they always had flexible working before. If you look at the salary guide, 61% of people had that option before the pandemic. And 91% of them actually feel more secure in their job now than they did last year. And the actual amount of people that want to leave the role this year has dropped from last year. So it suggests that the companies have handled it really well, although bear in mind, companies may have had less to deal with than, for example, in France or in the Netherlands, where everything went into total shutdown. So on that side, I think it's, they've handled it really well. Similar in the Netherlands, to be honest, 96% of people feel more secure than last year. So it says that obviously companies have done really well in keeping their staff engaged, which would fit in well with the percentage of people who thought that business decisions were well communicated with them. As on top of that, Cindy, I'm not sure what France is like.
In France, we actually came a long way. We never had this really remote culture, but the past years, and even more now with the pandemic, companies are aware that flexibility is an important criteria for candidate. Actually, this is also a plus when retaining those talents now.
That's interesting. I can echo what you just said about France, because the culture in Germany also wasn't set up really for this remote type work. I think it's much of a difference in the way you do business, but also a difference between the type of company. So here, I'm in Berlin. Obviously, this is one of the startup hubs of the world, and a lot of people were fully flexible, fully remote. They had an easy way to transition into this. But we also saw from the guide that only 26% of people, that 26% of all people here didn't have any flexible or remote option, even in the last year. And that's something that I hear every day pretty much from the more, let's say, traditional or older companies, consulting companies, industries like automotive, like energy, like, even media and tech, where they say, we're fully set up to meet people, to be on site, so you understand our issues, and then you can help us solve them with data, with new technologies. So they're open to that, but we still have a long way to go. There's still companies and people that prefer to really come in. And I think we have a long way to go until we're at this 80, 90, 95% level of remote. And as Cindy said, I can confirm that it is a big topic in every single conversation when it comes to a role briefing or people saying what they would prefer. This definitely is always an alignment factor to say, okay, does that go in line with what the specific role calls for and how this role is supposed to be operating? In some cases, it's really easy, but in some cases, there's also we help them to say, okay, how can we fix this? Because you need this person, and this person wants to join, but the setup still needs to be tweaked. So I think that's a big difference between the different areas in Europe. So.
Yeah, it's interesting as well that, as you said earlier, only 32% of people know what the working from home plan is after COVID. And I imagine there's probably going to be a misalignment of expectations, because I know a lot of companies do want people back in the office, but a lot of people have demonstrated that you can work from home. So, there could be either companies are going to have to change their policies quickly, or there could be quite a high turnover over the next six months.
Yeah, actually related to that, we just got a question from Yash. So thank you for the question, Yash, and everyone else, please ask them. I really like this question because he's asking, have European countries increased international hiring, and how do they acquire talent outside their region? I just like that because that's something we've dealt with a lot, because in Germany, in Austria, some other European countries, it's always been a bit of a challenge. It wasn't so easy to get people here in a quick fashion and get the permit and get the kind of residence and all that. And we've really seen an increase in companies when it comes to the willingness to do that. Mostly because of issues, people are more reluctant to relocate in the country or between countries. And also, again, this kind of on-site and remote preference. And in some cases, we've actually said, okay, it would be easier and better to get someone either relocating inside of Europe to Germany, or even from Latin America, from Eastern Europe. We've seen very many people moving that are willing and ready to go. And then there's been some very quick, not expensive, really easy solutions. So I would say, to answer the questions, definitely it has increased, yes. In certain spaces, it's been there like that before, but it definitely has increased across the board. And the way they acquire it is pretty much, from my point of view, the same as we would acquire them inside the country. The only difference is that the conversation about the current status, the visa status, and the timeline becomes much more important in managing expectations. When somebody says, we want to start in 8 weeks, and the authorities are going to take 10 weeks to process this request, then you have to manage that. But generally, the process is pretty much the same. And I think people, I don't know what you guys think, but I feel everything's grown a bit closer together. People from Hungary, from Slovakia, from Portugal, from Spain, it's very much come together to say, hey, what job is there in Munich or in Berlin or somewhere else that you can now go into that previously may have been a bit of a stumbling block, and you may have thought, no, I can't do that. That company's somewhere else. I don't know what you guys think about that.
Yeah, I think it's also the benefit of, when our clients are hiring, one of the reasons they work with us is because we also have that global presence as well. So, whilst you're working in Berlin, Peter, we've got people all over the world, the US, UK, Europe, that we have those networks with initially. So that obviously helps them to acquire that talent outside the region a bit easier as well. But it's definitely something we're seeing a lot more of. It obviously has its challenges in terms of relocation, particularly with COVID and companies struggling to get people on board with working from home from day one, when they could be so far away, and time zones, etc. But I think after COVID, we'll definitely see a lot more of that.
Good to know, guys. Actually, France isn't as open to it at the moment, as there is still a reliance on French-speaking candidates.
Tell me about it. I mean, just to mention that it is an issue in a lot of countries, including Germany, Italy also, just because the age average is much higher in the population. So that means a lot of managers, people that you would work with may not be as fluent in an international language like English, and so for them it's just not feasible. So I just had that yesterday. Somebody said, I wish I could have some English speaker, it would make my life easier, but I actually need this person to be able to communicate with our clients, so they need at least a little bit of German. So yeah, that definitely has an effect.
We've just had another question from Sten. So particularly for the Nordics, does a shortage of highly qualified data scientists constrain to the demand for data analysts in the Nordic countries? To be honest, there's a shortage for both. And I don't think it constrains the demand for data analysts, or even if it wasn't the case, vice versa. I think, unfortunately, businesses are just having to pick up the extra work that headcount might help manage. A lot of companies at the minute are hiring across all of the analytics spectrum, and unfortunately it is very talent short. And a lot of the talent out there, like I said, so in the Nordics, 91% of people feel more secure than last year. It does reduce the temptation to move, particularly in this risky period. So I don't think it constrains the demand, but they will still hire for those people. But I think in terms of the demands for the people that are working in that company, it's probably a bit more than what they would like or what they would hope for. But just moving on to that, actually, we can start to cover, why people are leaving and looking for new jobs. We've seen this year there's definitely a tie between career progression and salary not being competitive. So 74% of people last year said they would leave for the right opportunity. That's now down to 70. So in the scale of the guide, there's quite a few people who are probably a little bit more hesitant to take that risk. And it'll be interesting to see, hopefully, as this vaccine comes out next year, where that might be. In terms of some data, the Germany looked least likely to leave at 64%. People who are working in France and the Netherlands are more likely at 79%. But on an average, 89% of people feel more secure than this time last year, which is great to see for everyone involved in working. Interestingly, France is the least secure at 79%. Netherlands at 96% is the highest. Have you any comments on that, Cindy, as to why you think France might be the least secure?
Well, actually, as you just said, 79% of the French market is open to new opportunities compared to last year, where only 75% were happy to move, even before COVID happened. Well, I guess this is because companies are, as I mentioned earlier, are more aware of the flexibilities needed by those talents, and now they're just making it happen. From my experience, the big pool of candidates, for instance, has always been in Paris area. However, now people are moving to different cities in France to get a different lifestyle. It is not just about salary anymore. And during the several lockdowns in France, people have realized that they don't need to live in Paris area to do their job.
That's an interesting point, Cindy. It's different, I think, in Germany, but like Ewan mentioned, the number is very high for people who feel secure and very low for people who would, jump at something new. So I think these are very much related. We always had, longer durations and tenures for candidates. They're still short because of our space and how quick everything is evolving, but they're longer here than elsewhere. So people stay in the company longer. And I think companies did a really good job because early on, they got pretty nervous about people leaving or not staying, not necessarily to a new role, but just to say, okay, I need to find something that's secure for the coming years, or stay in my company. And then they really did a lot to make people feel safe, to give them a reassurance and to say, hey, this is going to be fine, you can work from home, this and that. So I think they did a really good job on that, but that led automatically to a lower willingness to consider something. And actually what people are saying to us, and we had this last year and it just got stronger, you either have a very much reluctant person that's almost impossible to get interested in something, or you have someone that's totally open, wants to go. There is not much in between. I'm not sure. I haven't really heard that a lot. And I think the other thing is, and that's also what we see in the numbers, is with the remote work, we have a lot of traffic in this country. We have the most used roads in Europe here in the western part. And I think a lot of people were just so happy. They didn't have to commute. They didn't have to drive in. And if you have a job that allows for that, it's a risk for you and the family to move to something new. So that's what we hear a lot from a lot of people. Again, to my earlier point, always something at the very beginning to say, okay, where would you want to work? How would you do it? Do you want to go in? And I think that's what's behind those numbers a little bit as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of this comes down, particularly for the next year, a lot of this is going to go down to how companies can increase their retention, because in the Netherlands, for example, 96% of people feel more secure, but 79% of people would leave their role. So that's gone up, which is obviously worrying for companies out there who either have big teams and need big teams, or have small teams and want to hire people. The last thing they want to do is lose people. So it was mentioned earlier, 68% of people feel like the communication has been good. 32% is quite high, not being well communicated with. So it's going to be a big focus point for companies in terms of, when things start to roll out, they really understand that they need to listen to their employees, because if everyone's asking from working from home and they don't do it, we can guarantee that there's 90 companies out of 100 out there that will be doing that. And communication is key within that. So I think obviously that's important as COVID comes out, that companies keep that interaction up, because they won't want people to leave as things open up and things start to get, I know it's really busy now, but it's probably only going to get busier, to be honest, as the economies start to grow up again.
And to the audience, just let us know how that is for you, because I think everybody has an experience to tell, and maybe a question around that, how it was for them. I'd just like to add one more thing, because we did talk a lot about the pandemic and remote working and all that, but you started actually with an important point of the tech stack, the perspective, and this type of motivation versus the other elements. And I don't know, that's just a question for you guys, because I've seen recently, especially in very technical areas, DevOps, cloud engineering, data engineering, where people, not necessarily why they're leaving, but why they're picking their new role, is very much focused on the tech stack. We have a very famous car company here in Berlin building something, and they have a very outdated stack, but they pay a very high salary. And we've had a lot of people actually tell us, I'm going to join another company, even though I really love this brand and I really love the money. But for me, as an engineer, as someone who's very much into data, it makes more sense career-wise and skills-wise and perspective-wise to choose something maybe that pays a little less, but it makes sense for me as progression. And we hear that a lot, and it's increasing next to all these obvious remote working and home working and all these types of factors. Is that something you guys see too, or is everyone very much focused still on just the remote and the kind of working environment?
I think it's certainly, from the data that we've got, it seems to be a lot more around the return to work. It has come up in the past that, tech stack has been really important, but I think across the Nordics and Netherlands, I think they're pretty current with what's expected there. So a lot more of the reasons why people are looking is, the promotions are hard to come by, which could obviously be down to the current situation, and relocation is quite a big thing. I think similar to Cindy, people are moving outside of the big cities, and they don't, and then they've maybe communicated that they need to go in 3 days a week, and they're not really up for that anymore. They've seen how much time they get back in their day from not traveling. But Cindy, I'm not sure about France.
I actually had this discussion with one of my data marketing agency I've been working with for several years now, and we see that obviously if companies want to be data driven now, they also have to really adopt an ambitious people first strategy, we might say, where this include career path planning that brings talents to positions with more responsibilities, obviously, and still keep those trainings to, learn new tools, as you just mentioned. This is what actually I see in the digital analytics market, and it has been like this for the past years. People need to work on new things.
Interesting.
Don't hesitate, guys, to ask questions, obviously. I'll be happy to answer them. Shall we move to the next point, guys?
Yeah.
Sure. I'm excited about this one, actually. Gender diversity. I'm going to speak about it within our sector, but stay tuned, as we are going to talk about it in more details with our diversity report that will come later on this year. Data analytics sector has always been a male leading sector. But this year, we actually had mixed signals, where there is a drop from, if I'm not mistaken, 23 to 22% of female professionals globally in Europe. However, I'm glad to see that France is the highest, and actually the only one to rise from 26 to 28 of female professionals. And to be fair, within my market, I always had a mixed genders anyway. I don't know, what about you guys? What do you see within your markets?
From our side, it's the numbers aren't looking great compared to last year, to be honest. Both have dropped. So the Nordics is down to 21% female, and the Netherlands is down to 20%, which obviously isn't ideal. I'm sure a lot of companies are looking into how that's happened. I'm not 100% sure why that is, and hopefully the full diversity coverage that comes out in the end of the year will provide a bit more data around that. I do know that a lot of the companies we're working with are trying to help with that, particularly around going to schools and universities to demonstrate how analytics is for everyone and what people can do in different aspects that they may enjoy. So hopefully it means that more and more people from all different diverse backgrounds are able to get into analytics because they're more aware of that. And maybe it's something where there's a bit of lag data behind that, and in a few years, whenever more people have been to university, studied those subjects, or entering the graduate schemes, that number will start to rise. I'm not sure if you've seen any attempts from your clients to kind of help bring those numbers up and achieve a more even split.
Yeah, I mean, I can actually pretty much echo what you just said in terms of the pipeline, let's say, of people who go into these kinds of courses and specializations that it just needs to feed through. I mean, in Germany, we're down 1%, 19 to 18. It's still low. It was low last year. It's low this year. But it also doesn't really surprise me because the focus has been very much on these, on the back end, let's say, on the tech side. Everybody was focused on growth, on customer success, and on new features, 2017, 18, 19, and then into 20. And then everything focused on the back end. And those we've always seen, engineering, software, data engineers, DevOps, very male dominated. The ones data science, we've actually seen an uptick in female professionals, and it's always been the same in digital and marketing. There's always been a large number of people with diverse backgrounds, so they just haven't really been focused on hiring in the last few months. So I'm not surprised to see this number. But in terms of what companies are doing, I think we haven't really polled this specifically, so this may be something for the diversity guide coming out later this year. But companies, as far as I can see, are very aware and very much doing, especially also to allowing flexibility for their employees, not necessarily specifically females, but how can you combine the family and the workplace? How can you give people a chance when they have a bit of a different background? Maybe they didn't study computer science, but they're a biologist. We just recently had someone like that, of a female PhD biologist who one way or another got into data science and also speaks 4 languages, and everybody was just very excited about her. So this type of thing, I think they're very open about it. But like Ewan said, we have the same. It's just a question of time also. And then you have these tech areas that are very much male dominated, and that will take time. So that's what I can say from our side.
Cool. Should we move on? So, yeah, just a reminder, if you do have any questions, please do chuck them in, and we'll try and answer as many as we can. And obviously, if you, like I said, you can download the link, the guide, sorry, from the link, have a read through. And if you have any further questions on that at a later date, please don't hesitate to reach out to myself, Cindy, or Peter, or anyone else at Harnham that you may be working with. Yeah. Peter, do you want to talk about salary?
Yes, let's go to the salaries. We have a lot of information on those. So I'll just throw some numbers out there for Europe, and then we can discuss. The average salary obviously went up, but again, like in the last year, we've seen a divergence between the increase that candidates seek and the increase that they actually achieve. So we have a 15% increase that's being sought on average. Of course, that can be up 20-25% or down to 10, and then achieved actually 10. So this is something that is clear for us also. We work with people every day. The expectations are higher than what the outcome actually is. So that's definitely something to talk about. And yeah, maybe just to give that to you guys now, is that something you've seen in your markets as well in terms of expectations of an increase that are not realized fully, or?
So on my side, France has always been the country with the lowest salary range when I compare it to other EU countries. However, each year we see an increase of the salary and the bonuses. For instance, this year, the average salary increase achieved when accepting a new role over the last year is 11%, which is huge.
I think from the teams that I look at, I think to be honest, the average salary increase has been pretty matching to the overall stats, and that 15% are looking for an increase, but 10% is achieved. And I think it obviously shows that candidates are maybe being a bit more flexible, but also that probably the purse strings are a little bit tighter when it comes to companies who are hiring. If you think startups, pretty tough out there. Even just to get funding that would allow you to get the new people on board, and probably naturally people have just started to be a bit more aware of what they're spending, and in case something like this would happen again, hopefully not. But like from a candidate side as well, it's obviously because a lot of people are putting all the reasons at the forefront of their mind, like the career development, like the perm management, like company culture maybe struggling in COVID, those things that other businesses can get there, be it a big brand that's thriving in the current market, is probably worth for a slightly less pay rise to then go for that stability and solve a few other problems that maybe you're facing in other your current company. So perhaps there's just a bit more wriggle room from because obviously to get this data, the candidates have been accepting the jobs, so that definitely shows that there's more flexibility from their side. And I suppose from our side as well, it's about trying to help our clients and our candidates understand what is possible at the minute. Initially they may have wanted 15, but looking into it, they appreciate that actually maybe 10% is at the current time is actually pretty good. But
yeah, I think
yeah,
sorry, yeah, no, yeah, you mentioned the startups, and that's definitely something we've seen here with the because one number in Germany is also 43% of participants said they receive a bonus of an average of 10%. So it's not a high number, but it's definitely almost half people receive a bonus, and that number is up from last year. And I think that's definitely related to the startup situation you mentioned. The funding dried up and their risk just went up, so they stopped just on this growth path, at least a very aggressive one that they were following previously. And so who doesn't pay a bonus? Usually it's a startup, right? I mean, you're looking at kind of the equity or participating in the growth once it kicks in. But before that, it's pretty much base. So that mirrors exactly what we've seen, that a lot of larger companies, not startups or medium-sized enterprises, they actually now had the chance to snatch up the talent and get really good people and attract them to them and excite them about the company, say, hey, you don't have to go to a startup. So that means, because they usually have bonus plans, that then more people receive the bonus. And that's something we still see now. The hiring is starting again, especially with the startups, and it's pretty much up to, I would say, 70% of what it was before. Mind you, some of these startups didn't survive. So up 70%, the companies that are in the market now, but they're still not paying a bonus, right? They're still operating on this very slim kind of startup, model. So that's something we've seen, and that makes sense. Just another comment on the salary, because I mentioned it before. People are now, at least we see, a bit more focused on not just the money. So I think they expect that increase because everybody knows that data and tech and analytics is a super hot topic, and it's growing and it's gaining importance, still a lot of importance. And so that's what you would expect, an increase. But then at the end of the day, they always say, okay, look at my perspective, look at the hours, look at the company, look at the product. And that then leads to a lower increase, but they still, like you say, are taking the job and companies are hiring them. And then everyone's pretty happy because we've also seen the tenure go up. So the churn actually went down. And so I think that's probably a good thing. I don't know, Cindy, if you see the same in France or how that was for you.
Yeah, 100%. Again, depending on the companies, we actually within, again, digital analytics market, we tend to work more with retailers or agencies. So it might be quite different here. So yeah.
There's also this one for you and I, Peter, but it's interesting that in Germany, 20% of people took a COVID-19 pay cut, which was the highest in Europe. And in the Netherlands, it was 7%, which was the lowest. Do you think that could also be down to the startup factors as well, where, obviously,
yeah,
people don't want to lose their jobs, but there's cost involved?
Yeah, thanks for raising it. I think I may have a bit of a bias because I'm here and I know kind of what's behind it. It's a good point. It may be related to that. Yes, the startups are obviously companies that would rather probably reduce staff instead of retaining staff and paying them less. So that may be related. But also what you have to see, and you know this from the Nordics, we have a very expensive but also an all-encompassing social security healthcare system here. And what companies did was, and that's related, I think, to the security feeling that people had. I mean, 93% of people feel secure in their role. That's an outrageously high number, if you ask me, in tech and data, right? So they know that, and then they said, okay, this is money that we will use also to make the company stronger and then to retain as many people as we can. And I think I've seen that not only in data, but in all kinds of sectors. And the government also had a scheme to support the companies and then pay people that money from the government side instead of the company. So they actually didn't, that they had this pay cut, but 60% of that was the company and 40% was covered by the government. And so for them, it was just added security. So it's a good number, and it's definitely higher, but I think that's more related to the system of the whole healthcare and what the state security, not state security, but the social security and the system itself does. And that may be related. But yeah, of course, I mean, we had a lot of people that joined startups or hyper growth companies, let's say, in 2019, 2020. And 3 months later, they call you up and they say, hey, it's great. It's a great job. It's a great company. But you know, we just shut down operations and now I'm open for something new. So that will definitely be related to a pay cut because you need something to work on then. So I think it's a bit of a multifaceted thing.
I'm not sure why the Netherlands is so low, to be honest. I'm sure there's a reason. You know, it probably, I know salary not competitive was in the top 5 reasons for leaving. So if people aren't feeling their salary isn't competitive, they may be less reluctant to take a pay cut. But it's just interesting how big a difference there is. Just a reminder for everyone, just to fire in some questions. We're getting towards the end now. We've had a couple come through. So Kunti has asked, what's the trend of gender diversity in tech leadership roles at senior levels? To be honest, we'll be able to cover that a lot better towards the end of the year when our diversity guide is released. However, you can have a read through of our 2020 guide, which was released September last year, and that has the info. So it is a bit outdated, but hopefully it would cover any questions that you've got. Another question we've got from Swati: what are the top trending tools that people should be looking to excel at at the moment, Cindy?
Yeah, I'm up for that one actually. Well, when I speak to hiring manager, also from their perspective, technical web analysts are more in demand than ever, and especially those with a knowledge in BigQuery or SQL. It's increasingly popular and basically can make the difference here. I don't know if you guys see, obviously I'm specialized within digital analytics, so I'm curious to know, what about you?
I think one thing I've seen, I know it's obviously trending tools, but tools are important, but I do feel there's a lot more emphasis on the communication part as well. So analysts are having to interact more and more with people, both internally and externally, from a technical background or a non-technical background. And it's really important now that, you know, you can't just code in Python, but you can also explain to people what this means and what the benefit is, more importantly, without them being confused from a technical perspective. I remember when I first started doing, for example, credit risk, it was all very much technical, whereas now they want the technical, and it's very important about the strategic and the stakeholder management, even from kind of senior analyst upwards. Perhaps maybe that was more of a head of responsibility, and now that's changed. But that's something that we're seeing more and more of, and it's certainly now where people are falling down in interviews. You know, they've got the technical setup, exactly what they need, but it's that communication part that's more important than ever. Peter, I'm not sure in Berlin.
Yeah, I mean, I think Germany and yeah, Germany specifically is kind of between what you guys mentioned there. Again, like Cindy said, it is different in different aspects of the market, right? In data science and data engineering, digital. But what we're definitely seeing is what you just mentioned is the stressing on communication skills, stakeholder management. So we get a lot of roles, I would say half of them, where it's really the ability to bridge the tech capabilities and the techie side of what can be done with the business and the requirements and the expectations of non-tech people. And that's going into even more junior roles. If you look at a media insights analyst or digital analyst, web analyst, we also see that in areas of product analytics and marketing analytics, where everybody kind of has the tech, but it really comes down, like Cindy mentioned in interviews, sorry, Ewan mentioned, the communication skills. But then the other side of the roles, the other half, I would totally confirm what Cindy said. It's a make or break decision. If you have the tool, if you have extensive experience with the tool, we see that in data engineering, without getting too technical, but I think most companies are now moving to microservice architecture. They're containerizing so they can update on the fly. People who know these tools, Kubernetes, who know these Docker tools, going to the cloud, that's something very big still. GCP, Azure, AWS, whatever it may be. So that's, and the more technical the application of the role, the more backend, the more DevOps, the more this is an important factor. And honestly, we tell a lot of companies, please look at the social skills, look at the culture fit, look at the general personality fit, because just because that person has 5 of the 5 tools you need doesn't mean they're going to stay and start and be happy. And that's important for you. So I think a lot of companies, we see that in the numbers too, with the retention and the questions, is sometimes too focused on the tech. And so it's always a bit of a balancing act, I guess, depending on what the role is and what the company is, what to look at. And then that answers the question, what tech should you get into? It is a base, but it shouldn't be all of it. So I guess that's what I can say to that.
And then a follow-up question to that from Miguel was, how important is statistics and data and analytics?
Big question.
Yeah, big question. From a graduate perspective, I think it's less important now. I think historically it was something that, but it also depends on where you go into, to be honest. So this will be very generalized and it may not help everyone, but I think from a graduate perspective, there's a lot less focus on that now. As long as you show the gravitas to want to learn that, or the knowledge that you can pick it up quickly. I do think there's obviously jobs out there where they do need people with strong statistics. Looking at credit risk, for example, if you're in a modeling role, it's really important. But if you were to do a more general analysis role on customer data or behavior, and look at the strategic side, it's a lot less needed. So I'm not sure if anyone else has added to that, but it is quite a big question.
To be fair, I'm not sure that it does apply 100% on the digital analytics side of it. But what I can say, if I can give my opinion on that, is like businesses growing out their own digital analytics, rather than they'll be more looking for technical web analysts that would know how to use, obviously, tracking tools, how to implement a bit of JavaScript, more than just into traditional marketing functions. I know it don't really answer the question, but I guess it's good to know as well.
I'll go a bit specific, actually. Maybe it helps some people, but if you're looking at anything around product analytics, and I don't talk about product management, but product analytics, that's statistics is the job. So that would be definitely important there. And maybe counterintuitive, but data science usually doesn't really look at it. We get a lot of people that say you need to understand what value it can bring to the business and how to translate that into a model, and then how to deploy the model into production. But it's not really around statistics. Risk analytics, this type of modeling, what you mentioned, definitely. Product, definitely. But overall, data analytics, statistics is definitely a good benefit, but depending on the role, you may not even need it.
Cool. Well, I think that's pretty much everything we've covered. Obviously, there's a lot more on our salary guide. So like I said, have a read through. And if you have any further questions, please reach out. Thanks for all the questions during the live chat. And thanks for listening, obviously. Hopefully you were all entertained. Yeah, just a reminder that our next live is tomorrow for the launch of the US guide. So if you have any interest in that, or if a client, if you're looking to hire in that area, feel free to tune in again. But yeah, thank you for listening.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.